Let's talk about fatigue. You know, that deep in your bones, drained feeling that's just way too common these days. But what if a part of the solution could be found in our food? Today, we're digging into the science of a fascinating fiber called beta-glucan, and its really interesting and sometimes confusing relationship with our energy.
I mean, we've all been there, haven't we? That exhaustion that even a strong cup of coffee can't seem to fix? Well, what's so cool is that a potential key to unlocking more energy might be hiding in something as simple as your oatmeal, or maybe in yeast, or even algae. And the secret ingredient is beta-glucan.
So what even is beta-glucan? Well, it's a type of soluble fiber, basically a complex carb that you find in the cell walls of a ton of different things. But here is the most important point, and we're going to keep coming back to this. Beta-glucan is not one single substance. Think of it more like a big family of molecules. The one you get from oats has a totally different shape than the one from yeast. And that difference in shape, it changes everything.
Okay, so we can all agree fatigue is a huge problem, right? It's not just about feeling a little sleepy. It messes with our work, our health, our whole lives. So as scientists are hunting for answers, some of these compounds in our food are starting to get a serious second look.
And this brings us right back to that critical idea. You really have to remember this. If you see a headline about a study on oat beta-glucan, you can't assume the same is true for yeast beta-glucan. It's like comparing a stick to a tree branch. They're both made of wood, sure, but their structure is completely different, which means our bodies are going to use them in completely different ways.
So let's get into that a little bit, because it's all about how these molecules are put together. The specific way they're linked up determines their shape. And, as you're about to see, that shape seems to determine how well they work. Okay, just take a look at this. You can literally see the difference. The beta-glucans from cereals like oats, they're mostly just long, straight chains. Pretty simple. But now look at the ones from yeast and fungi. They have this main backbone, but then they have all these little side chains branching off. And scientists think that complex branch structure is the key to why it seems to have a totally different and maybe more powerful effect on our bodies.
All right, before we jump into the human studies, we have to start where the science usually starts, with animal models. And look, I know, we're not rats or mice, but these early studies gave researchers some really juicy clues and pointed them in a fascinating direction.
So back in 2013, a study was published that really got people's attention. Scientists took some rats, they gave them beta-glucan that came specifically from oats, and then, well, they put them on a tiny treadmill and had them run till they were exhausted. And what they found was kind of wild.
And boom, here are the results. Check this out. The rats that didn't get anything ran for, about 47 minutes on average. But the ones that got the oat beta-glucan, they kept going for almost 72 minutes. That is a massive jump. We're talking over 50% longer. The science suggested it was because their bodies got way better at storing energy.
And this wasn't just a one-off thing. Other animal studies started popping up that pointed in the same direction. One in 2018 found that a beta-glucan from bacteria helped mice swim longer. Then another in 2020 found that a yeast-derived one helped improve motor function in mice with chronic fatigue. So you see the pattern, right? Different sources, oats, bacteria, yeast, but a similar anti-fatigue outcome in these animal models.
Okay, so this all looks really, really promising in animal models. But here's the million-dollar question. Does any of this actually work for us? For people dealing with real-world fatigue? Let's find out. All right, now we're getting to the human trials. And this is where things get a little more complicated and where that whole source matters thing becomes absolutely everything.
This table just lays it all out so perfectly. Look, in that Wooliver study from 2021, they used beta-glucan from oats. And guess what? No real difference compared to a placebo. Kind of a letdown, right? But then, you look at the Kawano study. They used one from microalgae, and bam, a significant drop in both physical and mental fatigue. And then you have the yeast-based studies, which found it really helped cut down on fatigue, especially in people who were stressed out. Are you seeing the pattern here? The non-cereal sources just seem to be in a different league.
So, what are we learning from these individual human studies? Two really big things. Number one, source, source, source. It's not a small detail. It seems to be the single most important factor. And number two, the effect might be even more noticeable in people who are already feeling run down or stressed to begin with.
Okay, so we've got some studies saying yes, some saying no. It can get confusing, right? So how do scientists get to the bottom of it? They do something called a meta-analysis. Basically, they scoop up all the good quality studies, throw them into one big statistical pot, and see what the overall picture really looks like.
And wouldn't you know it, a huge one on this exact topic was just published. A team of researchers gathered up 12 of the best randomized controlled trials to finally get the clearest picture on beta-glucan and fatigue we've ever had.
And here it is, the big number, negative 0.32. Now, I know that sounds like a bunch of scientific jargon, but here's what it means in plain English. When you combine all the evidence, taking beta-glucan has a real, measurable, statistically significant effect on reducing fatigue. It's not a huge life-altering effect, but it's a solid, small to medium one. It's clear proof that something is definitely going on here.
And you don't just have to take my word for it. The researchers themselves said it, plain as day. Beta-glucans are effective in alleviating fatigue. That's a huge statement, backed by a ton of data, and it gives us way more confidence than any single study ever could on its own.
Okay, so this is great, but what do we actually do with this information? Well, this big analysis gives us a kind of recipe for success. 3 key ingredients. First, you need the right source, and the data screaming. Non-grain sources like yeast and algae are where the consistent results are. Second, the dose. The sweet spot seems to be between 250 and 500 milligrams a day. And third, you've got to be patient. This isn't like a cup of coffee. You need to stick with it for at least 4 weeks to really start seeing a difference.
And the story doesn't end here. Scientists are so encouraged by these findings that they're now looking at the really tough cases. They're starting to ask, could this also help people with debilitating conditions like myalgic encephalomyelitis, which you might know as chronic fatigue syndrome or ME/CFS? The research is literally happening right now, which is incredibly exciting to see.
So where does all this leave us? Well, it's pretty clear we've moved past just saying, eat more fiber. The science is showing us that it's so much more specific than that. It's about the right kind of beta-glucan, from the right source, at the right dose. And it really makes you wonder, right? Could we be looking at a real, science-backed tool to help fight back against this fatigue epidemic we all seem to be living through? The research is definitely pointing that way,